Becoming Unkillable.
I'm here with my friend, Dr. Andy Galpin.
Dr. Andy Galpin, great to be back.
It is a very, very straightforward process. In terms of your broader question, like what is the actual limit of adaptation? I don't think there really is one.
So you want to be unstoppable. Every day I win or I learn.
We also probably need to be closer to what the Greeks, I think, originally started calling arete. A-R-E-T-E. You should probably be able to surf. You should probably be able to drive a motorcycle. You should be able to be flexible and mobile and sprint and jump and land.
Welcome to the Doctor and the Nurse, where I interview a high-performance guest, and then Dr. Daniel Amen and I sit down after to discuss what's going on in the brain for our guest in their high-performance capacity. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. Today I'm talking with Dr. Andy Galpin on how to become unkillable. So let's jump in. Okay, 2025, here's the deal. Let's get after it. Resolutions, throw them out. Let's make habits that last. So whether it's powering through workouts, recovering faster, or just feeling like the best version of yourself, your health starts at the cellular level. Check it out. I didn't even understand this, of how important this is. And that's where MitoPure comes in. So MitoPure is no ordinary supplement. It's a precise dose of the rare postbiotic urolithin A, scientifically proven supercharged to your mitochondria, aka the cell's powerhouses. So think of it as hitting a reset button on your cellular health, clearing out the old and making way for the new. 2025 is the new. So with regular habitual use, you'll feel the difference in improved energy levels to tackle each day with confidence, stronger, more efficient workouts, faster recovery, so you can do it all over again tomorrow. And the science doesn't lie. MitoPure is the only supplement clinically proven to rejuvenate cellular health, delivering double-digit gains, muscle strength, and endurance, even without changing your exercise routine. Yeah, you heard it right. The science meeting performance. So, exclusive offer, unlock your full potential 2025 right here, right now, the week of January 6th and 20th. Timeline is offering an incredible 33% off to my listeners of ordering MitoPure. So check out timeline.com/DavidNurse33 to claim your 33% off discount. That is timeline.com/DavidNurse33. Your cells are waiting and your best year starts now. Dr. Andy Galpin, thank you for coming on the Doctor and the Nurse. You have, so many titles, gurus, mastermind of human performance, sports performance. There's biochemistry, molecular exercise physiology. I mean, that's just a mouthful. So what we're saying is, ladies and gentlemen, this guy is a genius. But what I want to talk about today is becoming unkillable. All right. So this can go in many directions, but becoming unkillable, basically, for lack of a better term, you're the biggest badass in the world is what that would mean. Now, funny thing, there's this guy. I searched this, ChatGPT this up. The most unkillable person of all time is attributed to Michael Malloy. He's an Irishman in the 1930s. I see you shaking your head.
Yeah.
You're familiar with him.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow. Okay. That was, All right. He was,
like all these feats of surviving military things and not supposed to get out and all that and whatnot. Yeah.
Poisoning, freezing, homeless man in New York. So when you think about unkillable, like what comes to your mind? If you're just trying to put this all in a nutshell, what does unkillability look like to you?
Well, what it means is exactly what it means, right? So being more resilient to dying as you can. In terms of what characteristic traits and such need to be within that to be unkillable, I can't really speak to the psychological side of the equation. That's not my area. So if you're talking about things like grit and resilience and fortitude, sure, yes, of course. If you're talking about tactical skills like building a fire and defending yourself, like that's all great. Would throw those in as well, but that's not my area. I love being in the outdoors, but I know 20 people, I'd say, talk to these people more than you would me about things like that. What I can address is the physiological and physical skills that would be requisite. And I spend a lot of time on this stuff. I work with a guy named Brian Johnson, who's pretty infamous at this point about his desire to never die. And so from the physical aspects, this is how I put it together for him. Now, there's too many aspects here that for me to go through in our time we've got, but you want to think about everything ranging from, of course, the standard markers of longevity, VO2 max, leg strength, grip strength, having adequate muscle size and adequate muscle quality. You need to be out of metabolic dysfunction. You need to be out of energy toxicity. You need to have a minimal amount or a regulated amount of inflammation and oxidative stress, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of things that go in that, where most of them, and I'm saying that intentionally, being out of, which is you just want to be away from metabolic disease. There's no optimal place to be per se, but there's clearly a negative place to be. It's just being out of that stuff. In addition to all that, some of the stuff that we work on with Brian is probably closer to what a normal person would think about for long-term resilience. And that is things like you need to have physical attributes. I think everyone should be able to go for very long distances. That might mean walk 30 miles. Okay, that could be stay awake for 40 hours. It could be, sit in a moderately cold environment for a couple of days. These are things that are going to happen if these sort of silly goals of being unkillable exist. And a lot of those are physiological traits. So yes, you need to be strong and you have a high VO2 max, but we also probably need to be closer to what the Greeks, I think, originally started calling arete, A-R-E-T-E, which is you should probably be able to surf or ride a board of some kind. You should probably be able to drive a motorcycle. You should probably be able to ski a little bit, just in blue belt level, right? Just first level of proficiency. You should be able to be flexible and mobile and sprint and jump and land. If you look about things that happen that hurt people, that kill people in these situations, it's oftentimes the silly stuff. It's the fact that they had to jump off of a 15-foot building, broke an ankle, and now this is where it is, right? So it's more than just the VO2 max and muscle mass, as you're saying here. And those are some of the other categories. Like I said, people often don't think about mobility. Why? You need to probably get into crawl into certain positions, defend yourself in a physical altercation in a weird position that doesn't then tear your hamstring in half, because now you're really compromised. And so having a well-rounded skill set, and if you think about it from the perspective of, when I go out on my hunting trips, and I just got back from a week in the mountains, one of the things that I think about going up there is I need to be able to survive altitude. I need to be able to move a lot. I need to be able to do this with low fuel, not hydrated well. And, thermoregulation needs to be accounted for. I need to be able to manage my breath control, so on and so forth. So there's a lot to answer. Like I said, there's more to that general skip, but those are just some of the things that I would think about to be as unkillable as you stated it as possible.
Yeah. And I think that's a phenomenal job of just, setting a really strong structured baseline with actionable tools to do. I love the Greek term arete. The Greeks also had a term called techne, which means taking action on. And you did avert to the word resiliency a few times there. I know it's more of a mental, but I think it's also a physical as well. And there's the Yerkes-Dodson law that model says, the stress, you got to have a certain amount of stress, but not too much and not too little. I think it's always like a fine tightrope that we're kind of walking. And we both work a lot with professional athletes. And is there any kind of level that you have in terms of resiliency around pushing, but not pushing too much? How do you find that balance? And I guess taking it back a step for, just everybody listening too, is how can we find that in our normal day-to-day life? Enough stress that we move the needle, but not too much stress.
Yeah. So the way that we handle resilience is a couple of ways. First and foremost, very technically, there are scientifically defined markers of physiological resilience that you can get in blood work.
Oh, cool.
So people don't realize this stuff. While we use resilience colloquially, as this general broad spectrum thing, it is physiologically fairly defined. And this is actually one of the markers we test for in our blood panels. And so you'll be able to be told your physiological resilience.
Wow. What would those be? What do you check on? Like which ones tell the physiological resiliency for that in the blood work?
It is a combination of multiple markers. It is as simple as on our company Vitality Blueprint, you'll see your resilience score. So it'll be tested. It's already there, and you'll see all the markers that are included in that for you. So you can just get this off the shelf right now. You don't have to go try to figure this out on your own and source it. Just get it right there directly. We've actually had this. It's funny. I know you dealt with the NBA a decent amount. We've had a number, not a small amount, of NBA players, GMs, agents, and full teams buy this because they're specifically for the draft. So they're looking at this prior to drafting folks.
That's really interesting. So I used to do a lot of pre-draft in the training aspect and the mental aspect, talking to the GMs. So they're seeing, they want this so they can see like how far they can push it. What's their, basically what is their level, and when they hit the wall, what can they keep going? Is that what they're looking for?
It's probably not as far down the road as that, right? That would be really hard to predict somebody's mental quit button from a blood test. This is more physiological directly. So is this person going to be overloaded physiologically quickly? Are they going to be able to respond and handle the full season? Again, before they start having physiological problems, not psychological or mental. I can't
totally
go into those areas at all.
I think
injury likelihood, injury recovery rate, handle the stressors. It's that stuff that they're looking at. So they want to know, are they getting somebody who's going to be resilient? And as you know, in the sports world, there's physiology and psychology just on the top there, right? And a lot of athletes are really good at overcoming physiological poor attributes there because they're so tough, so focused. And then sometimes we see the opposite, right? Where you think this guy is mentally weak or this girl is just can't handle it mentally, but reality is their physiology is really getting pushed harder than their teammates, and so you actually need a different. So their grit is actually far higher on the day-to-day basis, but it looks like it's lower because what you're asking them to do is just overloading their system massively. And this is where we spend a decent amount of time on this stuff, is individualized responses and trying to get it, rather than just saying like everybody is going to do this same amount of stuff. It's probably an outdated approach. So that's why they're buying.
Yeah.
That's why they want those resilience markers.
That's really cool, man. And so, everybody can obviously take that test. That sounds like just, a no-brainer for people to go do. So, in another term in unkillability is adaptation. Obviously, you're very familiar with body adaptation. Physically, what do you think the limit of human adaptation can be? Do you think we're always adapting? It's just, there's a lot of research about it. I was just doing some fun research, and I found this population of the sea nomads in Southeast Asia, which literally have a culture. So
my boss is there right now.
Man, you're one step ahead of me in everything. You already know all of these things.
He's literally there right now.
That's crazy.
Or just was last week or a couple of days ago.
They're normally doing over 100-foot dives.
Yeah.
Crazy. So do you think every human has that ability to adapt? Is it just pushing through the threshold, or what? What do you think? What can we do to get into more uncomfortable situations without being cliche and saying, "Hey, get uncomfortable," or "Get comfortable with the uncomfortable"?
Yeah, the people that I think are the best in the sports psychology world are gonna feel like you're scratching fingernails on a chalkboard if you say get uncomfortable.
I hate saying that. Don't worry, man. Yeah, I'm not. No, it's way too. Yeah.
Because clearly you're not uncomfortable anymore.
No, exactly. Good point. Yeah.
Again, I can't cross into the psychology of are they just being tougher mentally or whatever of that. But from a physiological aspect, I can answer this in a couple of ways. It ties back into resilience as well. So with Brian and with our athletes, and honestly with our non-athletes, I gave you the example earlier of breaking an ankle jumping off of a 15-foot building. Reality is the vast majority of us will never experience that. Hopefully ever, right? What does happen though is you tore your Achilles playing pickleball. You threw your back out. It's changing the laundry.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Why is that happening? That is still resilience. And so a big part of being unkillable, in our opinion, or even me or our athletes saying, I just don't want you to get hurt. So you use unkillable as 20 steps down the line. But just fold it back 19 steps and say, fine, you don't care about being unkillable. But can we use this as a thought exercise to say, how can I make you the most resilient against big times off, big injuries, big problems? It's the same thing. It's just a few layers down. And so when I say that, a mistake that folks make a lot of times is because adaptation happens in direct response to stressors. And there's a scientific term that we use called SAID, S-A-I-D, which says specific adaptation to imposed demand, which means if you want your bicep to get bigger, put a demand on your bicep. The adaptation will be specific to the demand. If you demand it to be faster, it will get faster. If you demand it to get more fatigue resilient, it will become more fatigue resilient. The same thing is true psychologically. The same thing is true of every cell in all known biology. It is a very, very straightforward process. It is a very specific adaptation to an imposed demand. If you're not then getting the adaptation you want, it's because you're not being specific with the demand you're placing on it. Tying this back together, what that means is at the same time, if you become overly specific in only a few areas, a few styles of training, a few energy systems, a few body parts, a few movement planes, then you're by definition going to be not developing any adaptation in the other areas you're missing. And where resilience in the normal person starts to come into play here is they tend to get hurt doing something in those other areas. And so they're not resilient to novel stimuli. And so this is the first time they go swing a golf club in 6 months, all of a sudden, bam, the back goes out. Aha. So being as unkillable as we'll call it, or on, don't get it tweakable, is making sure you don't have any big hole in your game that you're completely eliminating. Therefore, when that challenge does happen and the dog runs out the door and you weren't ready for it and you have to sprint for a second, you don't tear a groin. And you slip on the concrete and you land and all of a sudden you don't have these major injuries because you just have never asked your elbow to bend like that in 25 years, right? And so with Brian and with all of our athletes and our normal folks, that's how we're handling resilience, is making sure there is no novel task that will hit you that's not completely crazy. I'm not having normal people jump off a 15-foot building, right? But the normal daily stressors, so that when something does happen, all of a sudden it's not going to cause a catastrophic problem with you because we're more resilient. So that ties in, David, to your previous question, which is to say, again, how do we handle these specific adaptations? Is we're really clear. When we're trying to move the needle on something, we spend 80% of our time on that specifically. But then we're going to allocate, say, 20% of our time to more general, well-rounded, broad, non-specific stressors so that we don't become hyper-specific and therefore have problems. The one exception is when we get close to elite level competition. As we get closer, like last week, one of our players actually was kind of the World Series hero, Walker Buehler, pitcher for the Dodgers.
Yeah, he was.
Right? As he gets closer to the World Series, we're getting more and more and more specific. And basically the only thing he's doing is getting ready to throw a baseball the exact way he wants. Nothing else is on the table because we want all possible recovery going into that adaptation to get to peak for performance. Right now, he's like, as we're speaking, he's at the parade. He's going to be having some time off. He'll go back and we will start and we will be way more general as the off season starts. And so we do the same thing with our non-athletes, is we take them through phases of specificity and general. And so that 80-20 split I gave you will differ. Walker was at 99-1 last week in terms of specific. He'll go start back at like 95-5, 95% general, 5% specific. And then the season will move throughout there. But as a normal average non-athlete, I'd probably say 75-80 specific and 20-25 as being your more general approach. So the answer of adaptability is it completely depends on which physiological process you're talking about. If you look at something like bone mineral density, we can see improvements in bone mineral density throughout age. We see adaptations and maladaptations. The same thing in the neurological system. But the rate of turnover is really slow. You will not see any appreciable increase in bone mineral density in a normal situation in 6 weeks. but you could absolutely see body fat loss in 6 weeks. You could see strength go up. You could see flexibility change. And so it depends on, are you looking at the immune system, bone, connective tissue? Are you looking at cardiovascular function, VO2 max, testosterone level? How adaptable these things are in terms of how quickly they change is completely dependent on the situation. But the last thing I'll say to answer this is, in terms of your broader question, like what is the actual limit of adaptation? I don't think there really is one.
Yeah, totally.
And we have enough data to suggest it is simply a matter of exposure. How much exposure can you get over how long of a time? And we've done studies in my lab on monozygous twins. So these have the exact same DNA with 30 plus, almost 40 years of differing lifestyles. And I could give you many examples from those studies, but one of them is their muscle fiber type. And so this is how many fast twitch versus slow twitch fibers they had, right? In the one twin that do chronic long duration exercise, you were talking almost effectively 100% slow twitch concentration. It's like 95% plus. The other was about 40%. So like you can go from 40 to 95 now that was 30 years, but with the exact same DNA.
It's crazy. Yeah.
So had they lived to 200, I bet that 40 would have continued to go lower and lower and lower. Had that other twin done more fast twitch type of training, which he was doing no training, he was sedentary. There's no real reason to think eventually it won't get to 100 on one side, 0 on the other, but it is certainly an asymptote, meaning the rate of change happens quickly at the beginning, but as you get closer to the end, then the change happens really, really slow, and so slow in some markers, it probably looks like it's not moving. But that's because you might need a decade or 20 years or 30 years to see an appreciable change. But that doesn't mean it's not technically still adapting.
Man, I think that's really encouraging for people to hear that, you're not just stuck with what your DNA is. You can actually adapt. And you hit the nail on the head. And I really like the breakdown too, that people could see, like the 99% focused when it's that time, that moment, compared to the 1, and then you go back and reset, even with professional athletes, knowing that, hey, you've got to be well-rounded, because as we know with athletes, the best ability is availability. And if you're only focused on one sole thing, you're probably going to get hurt. So there's many different ways that we could continue to go in this. There's endurance and pain tolerance and how to push that threshold, like David Goggins' top style. But I think I think one of the main things that you're an expert in as well is talking about sleep. And sleep obviously is a very broad term, but the main focus I want to talk about is the rumination issue. Is I work with, and you do, like we've mentioned, the top athletes, CEOs. A lot of them have a lot on their mind, and it's a racing mind. And I see it's kind of a catch-22 with the sleep trackers, where they're putting all their emphasis on the sleep tracker. And I think that term is like orthosomnia, something like that, where it's just dependence and the obsessive pursuit of getting sleep numbers. So how would you help somebody, a high performer, in terms of they have a racing mind, we want to get them the best recovery possible? What can somebody do to take action on that?
Yeah, we deal with this one all the time.
Yeah.
So we have a company specifically called Absolute Rest.
Nice.
And this is by far the world's most advanced sleep technology and coaching program. It's no one's even remotely close to us. You're right on orthosomnia. That is technically sleep tracker, sleep wearable induced insomnia, right? But you see it manifested. There's probably been 4 or 5 major publications in the last 2 months coming out on orthosomnia.
Wow.
So it's becoming a big deal. I can say this one publicly because he's given me much permission to do so, but I work with another athlete named John Rahm, one of the best golfers in the world. And earlier this year, he threw away his sleep tracker, and his rationale why was a handful of things, but one of them was, I feel worse when I look at my score. He forgot it on a trip or something, came back and was like, I actually feel way better this trip. And then what made it worse was he was in an international tournament, so he had to take like a 16-hour flight or something back, and he was changing time zones and playing whatever, and he's like woke up back at home and he felt horrific, and his sleep score was 100. And he's like, this is ridiculous. And the thing I always say here is, like, I don't mean to come off curt or elitist at all. But the reality is when you have a $600 million athlete, you really think we're using a $300 wearable on him.
Wow, good point, man.
There's no chance, right? There is no, I mean, we see him, I guess, but none of the professional athletes we deal with are wearing a $400 consumer grade sleep tracker. Like, I mean, think about that for a quick second.
Yeah,
like,
makes sense.
With how well we know sleep impacts every aspect of physiology, and like you think we're going to put that on them when a World Series is on the line? Like, come on. That's not how the people behind the veil are really doing it. So to answer your question directly, and again, I'm sorry if I sound super arrogant there, but like,
man,
it makes me laugh because I'm like, really? You think that's the best we can do? And we have $1 billion at stake?
Yeah, but it makes a ton of sense. Like to those companies' credit, they're going for the mainstream, which the mainstream that's probably great.
Fine.
Like you're able to check it, but we're talking here like the highest of high performance. So yeah, totally.
Yeah, we actually have a client in the Midwest who's he's worked with Absolute Rest since the very beginning, and he keeps going through it again and again because he's a day trader, so financial trader. And he has plotted his finance over many years directly with his sleep.
Whoa. And
he's like, every dollar I spend on you, I 20x it on my successful, better trades. So like, he's not an athlete at all. I don't think he even exercises, to be honest, but he just like, we have years of data now.
It's big time.
On him, directly tied to going, when I sleep better, I make way more money. So like, he makes more money in a day than he pays Absolute Rest for the year.
Yeah. I mean,
so it makes no sense.
Doubt. Yeah, totally, man.
No doubt about it, right? So
totally.
The original question, like kind of sort of trying to finally answer it, but we have much, much better approaches to sleep. And the person that's like the mental, like I can't turn my brain off. This happens to my wife. Now she's nor a professional athlete, nor is she a Fortune 50 CEO. And so this happens to the average, we'll call it, person. All the time. We have a lot of tools and strategies for that, but it really does depend on what is the actual cause. And so one of the things that makes Absolute Rest so significantly different is it is not a sleep test. That's not going to get you anywhere for the most part. It is a sleep test and then extensive analysis on why exactly you're sleeping that way. And I mean everything from blood work specific to sleep related physiology. Behavioral tracking, environmental scanning. So there's a scanner that goes in your room that scans everything from mold to CO2, dander, pollen, temperature. It is eye tracking and cognitive testing stuff. There are behavioral modifications, like all these things. And we do all that because now we understand exactly why you're sleeping the way you're sleeping. And so the answer to your question can be everything from doing a 5-minute down regulation breathwork routine before bed, or taking a specific supplement, or none of that, and you're exercising too high intensity too late at night, or none of that, and we simply have too much CO2 and pollen in your bedroom, and we need a specific air purifier or some algae. Like, so we've covered this one a ton, and often, most of the time, the answers are pretty simple, but we just need to know why. So if the person who's got junk in their environment, and I'm saying that because there's extensive data now that specifically ties sleep onset, so the time it takes you to fall asleep, sleep quality, waking events, next day cognitive function, next day perception of your feeling, all specifically tied to environmental factors in your bedroom.
Totally.
So you can bang your head against the wall trying to take more supplements. You can try to, change your eating routine and your workouts and, do your NSDR. You can do all those things and it might help a little, but it's probably not really going to solve your problem because that wasn't really the cause anyways. And so this is often where coaches kind of go wrong, sort of just like, well, your sleep sucks. And it's like, well, you're not listening to me. You're not, it's like, yeah, sure. But like, that wasn't really the problem. The opposite case would be like, someone might be blaming it all on their environment. And it's like, hey, dude, the reality of it is you've got to get off your computer at 8 o'clock. Like, you can't keep doing the email thing. Like, so these cliches, these common things we do here, they are real. Sometimes people come in and they pay us a reasonable amount of money and they go through the whole thing and we're like, okay, no more glasses of scotch right before bed. Like, you got to stop. Like, So I hope that wasn't not a non-answer answer. I actually gave 5 or 6 things out
No,
right
you
there
totally
that,
did.
that you can try.
You totally did. And I think in each point, and we're wrapping up here, and just so everybody knows, like you've got a podcast. I've listened to all 10 episodes. Hope you do another season. It's phenomenal. You've been on many
Thank you.
podcasts, so you can just, get everything where Andy's one of the smartest human beings, bar none, in any kind of physical performance, human sports, all of that, like we talked about. But I think you've done a really good job of giving baselines of like, okay, what's the lowest common denominator that you can do now? And you're like, hey, no screen time, don't drink, don't eat. And then also going into what I think is so important is the specificity. And I think as we continue to go deeper and deeper into human optimization, it's people will understand like there's not one cookie cutter thing. Like it's why you can't look at a workout routine and being like, oh, Michael Hearn does that, like, so I'll do that. Or, any kind of food. There's just so much specificity in what you are doing in your companies. It's above where the normal person understands now, but where the high-level athlete and high-level CEO can, understand and really benefit from. I think the last thing that I would ask you before we jump off here is just, and I think it's been interesting because you work with Brian Johnson, and he's just, he's the longevity guy people know him as. Has there been anything interesting that you've seen through this research and work with him that you've just been like, whoa, I didn't expect this. I didn't see this coming. I didn't know how important this aspect is for unkillability or just overall optimization?
Yeah, I'm not part of Brian's inner circle. So like the bigger picture stuff of what he's doing is like outside of me. So I wouldn't be able to comment too much on his stuff. He's pretty open about it though. So you could kind of go and look there. I pretty much stick to the physical training, when it comes to him. So he'd be a better person directly for that answer. I would say that from the clients that I do coach personally, and we've got quite a bit at our coaching program. I wouldn't say that there is I would say that the most direct answer is getting something close to precision. So not everyone can afford to go through absolute rest. Not everyone can afford to go through vitality. Not everyone can afford to go through our more comprehensive coaching program called Rapid Health and Performance. But can you find one thing? Can you get something can you figure out how your body responds best to your exercise? Can you figure out when you should exercise? Can you figure out what thing you're eating is causing the most problems or the most benefit? Is ideally free, right? Can you figure out, was it your wake up time, the sleep schedule? Can you figure out one thing at a time? And if it is your yearly goal to figure out one thing in all these lifestyle practices, so you go, oh man, I do feel way better when I don't do this or I do this. You stack that 4 or 5 years in a row, you're going to be in a really good spot. And if you look at what Brian did, that's exactly what he did. He spent a ton of money on it, but he went after one thing at a time and then added sleep, and then added blood transfusions, and then added exercise. And it took him many years to get there. But that's the same approach can be taken by anyone, just, at whatever level of budget you got. If you got $2 million a year, spend $2 million. If you got $25 a year, spend 25. But that approach could work for anybody.
Really good, man. Andy Galpin, thank you so much. You were just a deep well of knowledge. So thank you for all you do, man. Thank you for teaching our listeners on how to become unkillable. Thank you, brother.
My pleasure, man. I appreciate the opportunity, David.
So let's check in with Dr. Daniel Amen on what's going on in Dr. Andy Galpin's brain. So Andy talked about the SAID principle, specific adaptation to impose demand. Like if you're trying to make your bicep bigger, you must put demand on it. So how do we use this for the brain? Basically, if we're going to build these bulletproof, unkillable bodies from the outside, how do we best build a bulletproof, unkillable, resilient brain?
So I love working with high-performing athletes, and I find most of them have no idea how to manage their minds. That, there's actually no class in school on how to manage your mind.
Crazy.
And they believe every stupid thing they think.
Yeah.
And so I teach my patients how to kill the ants, the automatic negative thoughts that steal their happiness. I teach them to not want to be the best. Because if you want to be the best, it means you have to beat other people, which is isolating. If you want to be your best, that's inclusive because you can help other people be their best too. I mean, of course you want to win, but if you have to be the best in order to have self-esteem, you lose, right? Because even if you win, you lose because you're isolated and alone.
That's a good point.
And so my best, it's always, and it's every day I win or I learn. I win or I learn. So if I had a bad game, it's like, did I not eat right the day before? Did I not sleep right because we had to fly across 3 time zones? I did a year consulting with NBA referees.
Oh, wow.
And I love that.
That's
it was so much fun. And I love them because they have to make these split-second decisions and then have, people like Shaq yelling at you. And they're all sleep deprived.
Oh, I bet.
Because they work late at night and then they had to take the first flight out in the morning, which was just insanity because you cannot make high-level decisions when you're sleep deprived. So you want to be unstoppable. One, it's practice, right? You have to teach your brain how to do whatever you want to do in those high stress situations. And then you have to manage your mind.
Yeah.
And often my high-level players say they always play best when they're not thinking.
Yeah.
And so you got to get the critic to shut up.
It's funny how sleep just is undefeated. Like people talk about all different things you can do, biohacks, all this. But when it comes down to it, a great night's sleep is
So good.
undefeated. Speaking of that, Andy talked about this term orthosomnia, an unhealthy obsession with getting the perfect sleep. So like looking at your tracker or your ring and just being obsessed with it. So he works with his athlete, John Rahm. He's one of the best golfers in the world. And he said John actually feels worse when he's putting on his sleep tracker, when he's actually tracking his sleep. Do you think these sleep trackers help or hurt? And do you think, I guess the bigger question is, do you think the grinded out mentality, like the Goggins, busy as a badge, and great sleep is looked at as a luxury that you shouldn't have? So how do we shift, and how do you think society will shift the mentality of this busy as a badge, grinded out, to the more important, get sleep. Get sleep because it's going to help you much more than it is just waking up at 4 a.m. like these referees on no sleep.
So if you don't get 7 hours of sleep at night, it actually turns off 700 health-promoting genes.
Jeez.
It decreases blood flow to your brain, and it increases your risk of dementia. I think when you sleep, your brain cleans and washes itself. And so if you're with someone who says, you can do it, you don't need it, that's just stupid. It's not smart.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's a biological fact that if you're not sleeping an appropriate amount, you're not cleaning up the trash that builds up during the day, and it's going to gunk things up. So I think sleep is absolutely essential. The trackers are not as accurate as people think.
Yeah, they're not.
They're about 65% accurate, and so we're being sold a bit of a bill of goods with it. But I would say like I always talk about brain envy, right? You have to love your brain and want it to be better. I think you should have sleep envy. And this is a priority for me, because if you get a good night's sleep, you're likely to get more work done because you'll be sharper.
Sleep envy, that's cool. People should have that needs to become a term. People wake up like, hey, how much sleep did you get?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I got 7.5. I got 8. That would be a shift. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you enjoyed this episode, there's plenty more where it came from. You can go find another episode just like it right here. Come on. You can click it. You know you want to.